Okay. Okay, so let's go into this, the role of the earth sector in climate policies and its potential in achieving the climate goals at global level. I mean, this is indeed my field, but I don't know if you had, it crossed through your sectors or activities that there is a more and more attention on this nature-based solutions, so-called, which is a broader concept that covers not only climate change, but also cities, environment, water, erosion. So all the solutions that are based on nature that meet that increase the resilience of a natural environment, but also meet the social challenges. So these nature-based solutions are increasingly scaling up the news and also becoming at the center of the policy dialogue for climate change, which is indeed is important. Then we will look at but please keep in mind the graph that I showed you, that nature can only assist whether and when there is a deep decrease in emissions. Otherwise, it's hard to rely completely on nature. Both should come side by side: emission reduction and protection of forests and other ecosystems. So what is the contribution of the AFOLU, the so-called agriculture, forests, and other land uses, the balance of this important sector within the global greenhouse gas emission balance? The upper side of the graph, this graph is where emissions occurs, and the downside are the removals. So if we look at this part, we can see that land use change in forestry emissions account to 5.8 gigatons of CO2 per year, while on the other side, emissions linked to agriculture, which is mainly non-CO2 emissions due to fertilization, enteric fermentation, manure management, rice fields, account to up to 6.2. So the combined effects of these two activities, and sectors, accounts for around 23% of global emissions. Before we said 24. This is a most updated let's say statistics based on the 2018 report of the IPCC. Of course, the emissions has increased since then. The previous figure was from 2014, I think. But anyhow, the AFOLU contributes around 23 and 24% of global emissions. From the other side, there is also the natural response of land to human-induced environmental changes through, as we said before, through CO2 fertilization, for instance. So increasing the quantity of CO2 in the atmosphere, which is one of the basic components of the photosynthesis. This increase, it creates somehow a fertilization to the plants that increase their capacity to have sinks. And this what has increased actually the response of nature to these environmental changes with a sink of 11.2 gigatons. So if we consider also this natural effect somehow, so the natural response, the land as a whole has actually acts as a sink, so somehow compensates its own emissions through removals, also with a net gain of 6 gigaton. I forgot the giga. but there is a G here missing, of CO2 equivalent per year. Anyhow, this is a natural response, and it's actually linked also to the existence of forest in good health and good conditions. So the more we deforest, the more land forest shrinks, the less response we will have to rely to. So what are the mitigation policies that in the forestry sector specifically, but let's say then we will go on also through the agriculture. Indeed, there is the action of enhancing the carbon sink through new forests and increased carbon stocks in existing forests. Reduce the carbon sources, reducing the deforestation and forest degradation, and also an important role of carbon substitution. So replacing the wood replaces fossil fuel through bioenergy, although there are some criticism on that. We need to take carefully this into consideration, but also other emission intensity products, the products like concrete, cement, and iron. So it's the land sector, as we said, it's is part of the problem, but also part of the solution. So it's this 23% of emissions can hide also great opportunities to actually decrease the global emissions. Because, I mean, through photosynthesis, just to give you quickly a background, through photosynthesis, the CO2 is stored in the woody biomass, and then Tommaso later will explain better this then goes to the soil. That is one of the greatest stock of carbon of the terrestrial ecosystem. So it has a really great importance in the carbon cycle, but on the other side, is non-permanent, this storage. So it can be reversed into the atmosphere through disturbances such as logging, harvesting, normal mortality, pests and diseases, and wildfires. So quickly, those carbon that is stored in a very long time within the forest can be quickly released into the atmosphere with a loss not only of CO2 but also of biodiversity and other important ecosystem services that forests provide. Forests offer synergies between mitigation and low cost, adaptation, biodiversity, and are also been a key element in the climate policy debate. When we within the, let's say, the UNSCC and the climate policy debate, international climate debate, we have two big, let's say, groups of emissions and removals. There is the LULUCF, which is land use change and forestry, which mainly deals with CO2 and detects all the cycle of CO2 within the biomass photosynthesis and storage in the carbon soil, litter, harvest. So all the carbon cycle, biogenic carbon cycle. And it's partly human-induced and partly actually naturally driven. So it's always difficult. I mean, we need to remember that the scope of the UNFCCC in general is to limit the human interference in the atmosphere and therefore to reduce the human-induced emissions. So in the forest sector, it's always difficult to attribute what is really human-induced, what is actually natural origin. Then when we speak about agriculture, actually within the UNSCC context and reporting, we are also speaking about reporting. We are referring to all the gases that are not CO2, like methane, nitrous oxide, that are linked to agricultural activities, which is fertilizer, manure management, and enteric fermentation, and rice pods that are a source of CH4 emissions. So those family of gases and sources are under the agriculture sector, while the other sector is land use change and forestry are those emissions linked to the management of the land and deforestation, afforestation, and management of forests in general. Also agriculture management, but only in the part of the soil carbon cycle. The two sectors are aggregated in the so-called AFOL sector, which is agriculture, forest, and other land uses. Just to clarify the terminology, because otherwise can be a little bit confusing. Why we said before that the land sector have been, in forestry specifically, have been subject of a long debate. It has been always considered the ugly duckling of the negotiation, very complicated to treat with, a lots of, let's say, not only interests, but also added values attached to forests and different perspectives from many countries. I mean, terrestrial ecosystem, provide food, fuel, shelter, preserve biodiversity. I mean, they have a huge amount of services and environmental benefits, offering opportunities, synergies between mitigation and sustainable development, but also potential conflicts. And why it was particularly difficult within the negotiation, because, as I was saying, how to factor out the natural components and how you can account for only for the human-induced changes in the fluxes. This is technically very difficult. We partially solved it within the IPCC guidelines. There was a compromise way out in practice. The countries are reporting any flux that is occurring in the managed land as human-induced. Indeed, it's not completely right, but it's extremely difficult to factor out the natural component. So they found this proxy to actually make them possible in an easy way. Easy, I mean, it's not that easy, but it's in a feasible way. The reporting of emissions and reduction to of the LULUCF sector. There is also this component of the this is characteristics, which is non-permanent. As I said, the carbon stored can be reversed in the atmosphere due to disturbances. And also, again, there are disturbances that can be under the control of a country, but others that they are not, like large fires that are that they reach a size that was beyond the human control due to climate factors, meteorological factors such as wind and droughts, and that can reach a size of these events that are well beyond, or even storms and pest and disease. So also this natural component versus human-induced components in non-permanence is a tricky issue. If we consider that, just to give you an example, the fires in Canada, which is part of the normal natural cycle of the forests, have an emission that are nearly equal of their country's emissions. So if you include all the forests and with also their emissions, which are beyond the control of the country, they have resistance to include this big portion of their land if they have also to account for this kind of events such as fires. Then also an important thing is the long time scales. We are talking about targets that are of 5 or 10 years, like from 2020 to 25 or up to 2030. While in practice, in your country, you may have a large portion of forests that are coming from afforestation that, for instance, in Europe, is mostly the case that are coming from the post-Second World War. And then now they are at the end of the cycle. So during your commitment period, you could have a lots of emission due to normal harvesting of your forest that are at the end of the cycle. So this needs to be taken into account, not to pay for past decision, management decision. Saturation as well, that, as I was saying, the capacity of forests to absorb, they reach a saturation point, and also the uncertainty. I mean, even if in the EU, where the reporting is consolidated activity, the uncertainties for the land sector is still high, nearly 10-30%, while the other sector have uncertainties less than 5%. So also this into the picture makes it difficult how to include these sectors. So this is why it has been always perceived as the ugly duckling. There is also an economical factors, and I mean it's especially in agriculture, where while the emissions have been reduced in the Annex 1, which is the developed countries, the non-Annex 1 countries, the developing countries, have seen an increasing trend of emissions in agriculture, and this is actually foreseen to increase further in a long time, even because the population is increasing, and actually the projection is to have an increase up to 30% by 2050 of emissions from the sector. Agriculture, as we said, it's enteric fermentation, which is actually causing the 44% of the world CO2, methane emissions coming from of human-induced emissions, and this actually is increasing is increasing rapidly because red meat actually is food that is increasing around the world. And if we consider that for 1 kilo of meat, 14 up to 20 kilos of cereals are needed. And then it was also that accounted that for 1 hectare of rice production, 18 people can live out of one hectare of rice production, while for 1 hectare of cow grazing, only one person. In US and Europe, half of cereal production is for animal consumption, and we will see later that also the soy that is cultivated, the large-scale soybeans cultivation in Latin America, are mainly produced for animal feeding. And then also fertilizer, as we said at the beginning, they increased by 9-fold since the 1960s. And they contribute by 82% of N2O emissions. And as well, manure management, which also has high impacts for the air quality as well. So, I mean, there are lots of connected issues also on the environment, pollution, that are linked to agriculture production, which is something that we actually cannot avoid, or includes changing some so like diets for the developing countries and developed countries where there is a high consumption of red meat, but also reducing losses and waste, something that we will look later on. Another source of emissions, as we were saying, I mean, it's the deforestation. The deforestation is estimated of it was estimated that 420 million of hectares of forest has been lost worldwide through deforestation since 1990. The rate of forest loss has declined substantially. Those are the latest FAO of Forest Research Assessment report in 2020. But in fact, it passed from 2010 to 2015. There was an annual rate of 10, while the previous 5 years registered 12 millions of hectares lost per year. Mainly the drivers of deforestation is actually attributed to cash crops. 3/4 of the tropical, 70% of tropical deforestation is linked to the production of palm oil, rubber, coffee, cocoa, soybean, meat production, and of course this pattern changes from one continent to another, but anyhow, in total, we have this huge portion of deforestation linked to these commodities, to cash crops. Here we have a breakdown of the changes in forest cover per continent. And I think it's interesting to see here that while in South America there was a decrease, I mean, in the last year, we are experiencing in the recent 2 years, actually an inversion, a worrying inversion of these trends. But anyhow, in general, in South America, there was a sharp decrease of deforestation rates, while in Africa, there is an increasing trend of deforestation, which is quite worrying, while in Asia, there was an increase of forest cover, so positive increase due to massive campaigns of afforestation. But this trend is slowly decreasing, but and indeed the different trends across countries can be detected as well here. Another component that sometimes the focus is actually on deforestation, but also forest degradation. It's an important, extremely important source of emissions. It's attributed for the 53% on timber harvest, 30% on fuel harvest, and 17% on forest fires. And there are studies like this from Pearson, which is quite interesting, on carbon balance and management, that estimates the forest degradation emissions up to 2.2 gigatons of CO2 per year, and summing the 25%, attributing 25% of the emission from deforestation, forest degradation. So, I mean, this is also an important factor. So how the international context has taken into account these patterns of emissions that are mainly occurring, as we were saying here, in developing countries. This is, I mean, I don't know if many of you probably knows already, there is let's say a framework under the UNSCC that has a very long gestation to come out. Anyhow, and it's called RED Plus, which is, it's an acronym that means reducing emission from deforestation, forest degradation, and the plus is related to conservation of forest carbon stock, sustainable management of forests, and enhancement of forest carbon stocks, which implies afforestation, reforestation activities. And this system actually is aimed to reward developing countries that implement actions and policies to reduce their deforestation and degradation pattern, as well that implements this plus, let's say, activities. They can get some money and funds from the from international community on the basis of the results achieved. This has been initiated under the UNSCC. This process, it's the REDD Plus framework is composed by 13 decisions developed in 7 years, which was a good, I mean, considering the slowness of the negotiation process. Is a stepwise approach. They established those decisions, the access criteria. Countries need to have in place national strategy, a forest reference level, monitoring system, and a system to ensure safeguards, both social and environmental safeguards. They need to establish this forest reference level against which the results are calculated. And then have, of course, a monitoring, reporting, and verification system in place to track the changes in their forest cover. And the GCF, the Green Climate Fund, has actually established a fund window for funding this kind of result-based, for result-based payments. But also funding also the readiness activities to assist countries to achieve the payment of their results. And then you can find in the IPCC, in the UNSCC website, an information app where you can find information on the results of REDD Plus activities corresponding result-based payments, which is called Lima REDD Plus Information Hubs. Okay. Those are the 3 phases of the REDD Plus. The phase 1 is the country design of national strategies and action plan. The phase 2 is the phase where national strategies and action plan are implemented and tested. And then we have the 3rd phase, which goes on the results-based actions that are implemented, REDD Plus actions are implemented, and results are fully measured, reported, and verified, and can receive payments from the GCF or single countries. Any country, developing countries, can enter in one of these phases directly. I mean, doesn't need to go through all these phases one after the other if the conditions are to enter of the country are enough to enter in the phase 3. Then the country can go directly in this phase, which means it has a forest reference level, a monitoring system, a system for safeguards, and all these criteria that we were mentioning earlier. How this, this has been, all the negotiation of the REDD Plus has been concluded in Warsaw, which was 2013. So well before the Paris Agreement. But the land sector, the Paris Agreement actually recognized the REDD Plus as a framework, as such, to rely on. And actually the land sector in general is the only sector that has a dedicated article under the Paris Agreement, where it is emphasized, it's that parties should take actions to conserve, enhance, sinks and reservoirs of greenhouse gases, and they are encouraged to take action, implement and support, including through result-based payments, the existing framework under the UNSCC for REDD+. So also REDD+ is spelled out and recognized under the Paris Agreement as an important tool for climate action. And in the decision, accompanying decision of the Paris Agreement, the 1CP21, that recognized the importance of adequate and predictable financial resources, although missing the opportunity to set a target, a financial target. It's just recognizing it's important, but without defining any target. If we look at the role of the land sector within the UNSCC, I mean, Grassi of the JRC have in 2016 made this assessment quantifying the contribution of the land sector within the UNSCCs. And it ended up that the land sector is actually contributing for 0.7 gigatons of CO2 per year if we consider unconditional target. If we add also the conditional target, it's actually doubling. So relative to the emissions from all sectors, the contribution of land use sectors is up to 20-25%. So it means that for 20-25%, in general, all global countries, the NDCs are relying on the land use change and forestry sector. And this is true particularly for developing countries. So it's really recognized as an important tool, especially in countries where the land-related emissions are actually the most dominant emissions within their global budget, I mean, country budget. So if we look at this table, which is again coming from the previous paper, we see that if we look at the unconditional and conditional NDC, there is a much more, let's say, component of reducing of emissions from developing countries. So reducing emissions from deforestation and land use in general, while developed countries have attributed in this NDCs a role of the forest, a role of sink, so increasing sinks and removal. So since the deforestation is actually not an issue there, rather improving and increasing the land sink, it offers a climate action that's viable for those countries. So this is, let's see in detail. So what are the actions and what is the size of the mitigation options that can be achievable in the land sector? And this has been the subject of this climate change report, which is climate change and land report from the IPCC, that treated the different aspects, food systems, degradation, adaptation, governance, also, as we were saying before, within governance, also land tenure issues have been tackled. So it's extremely interesting, and I suggest you to go through those, although I haven't spotted any, let's say, mountain, let's say, specific part as actually it was in the other related to the cryosphere and ocean report. Anyhow, I think it's cross-cutting and it's a very interesting document. And one of the products that has important product is not pretending that you go through all these actions, that anyhow, they identified 40 options that are aiming to not only to decrease, decrease emissions in the land sectors, so mitigate climate change, also adaptation, and reducing also the risks in agriculture, in forests, in soils, in all systems beyond soils and systems beyond forest and agriculture, bags and also demand management and supply, like dietary change, reduce post-harvest losses. So they analyze all these different actions, considering also their interaction with SDGs and biodiversity. We have here their assessment. They provided this assessment with a positive and negative impacts. All the major families of actions related to agriculture, forests, I was saying, other ecosystems, and these response options, like increased food productivity, has a large impact, positive impact in mitigation, adaptation, desertification, land degradation, and food security. While, for instance, forest management, reduced grassland conversion to cropland may have a negative impact on food security. So each of those response management options have been assessed carefully with the specific criteria and indicators. Just a focus on some of them. Sorry, there is a context, which is context in English. For instance, forest management, which is responsible of 12% of global emissions, if we consider also deforestation and forest degradation. We saw that it's also a natural sink of 30% of human emissions. In this case, the potential of emission reduction, especially for the reduced deforestation and forest degradation, is extremely high, up to 5.8 of gigatons, nearly 10% of our emissions, with a very list of positive impacts and also low costs. Then the report also consider the reforestation and forest restoration and afforestation. And in here, there was a long debate in approving this kind of assessment because it's actually highly related. The impacts of those activities are highly related to the scale, where and how. So there were a long debate at a political level because politicians negotiate the summary for policymakers, not the results of the reports, but how is these results of the report, scientific reports, is reported to the policy arena. And this negotiation is actually backed by the authors that actually it's a very interesting process. I was involved in this of the IPCC for the land report, and it was extremely interesting. Anyhow, the debate was that many countries were seeing the reforestation and forest restoration as a negative, with a negative impact for food security, but actually this is linked to the scale and the amount of land that you occupy with forest and you take away from the agriculture activity. So they had to split this assessment of the impacts with a high level and the best practices to frame better the impacts in relation to the scale. So while large scale afforestation and deforestation may have negative impacts, the best practice, as said, that are based on country circumstances, recovery of marginal land, and provision of many multiple benefits could have a positive impact if implemented correctly. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I already touched upon those issues. Another sector that has a very huge potential of carbon mitigation is also the agriculture. We see here some actions like increase food productivity, agroforest in a sustainable manner. This is important to specify, which is a huge potential in terms of reduction of greenhouse gases, because if it is performed sustainably, so not with the use of nitrous oxide, can have a very large potential. Agroforestry, improve cropland management, improve livestock management, agricultural diversification, improve grazing land management are all options that are considered within this report, and where the emission reduction potential have been assessed. An example of which are, because I mean, when we say we improve cropland management, what does it mean? What is implied? Because it's not just an activity, but it covers multiple activities like crop rotation, use of cover crops, perennial cropping system, nutrient management, including optimized fertilizer, reduce tillage intensity and reduce use retention, improve water management. I mean, there are many options under this umbrella that can be selected according to the national circumstances and local needs. Another example is other ecosystem, like fire management. Fire is a huge source of emissions, and has again a huge potential. If we look at this maximum is 8.1 gigatons of CO2 emission as a maximum potential, but also restoration of coastal wetland and peatland, a conversion of peatland. So those are other examples of soil, but this I think Tommaso will go into that as well. The interesting aspect of this report that is introduced also the biochar, which is an organic compound used as soil amendment that could provide benefits for food security, improving yields up to 25% in the tropics, but with more limited impacts in temperate region or through improved water holding capacity and nutrient use efficiency. So positive and negative impacts are also considered, and increased soil organic carbon content has again a huge potential of carbon sequestration. And finally, also the food system as a whole has been analyzed, and that's very interesting outcome of this report. They actually assessed that 37% of global emissions are due to the food system. So it's a huge, also considering all the transportations, and not only the two sectors that we were, land use change, transportation, methane emissions due to enteric fermentation, use of fertilizer. So if you sum up everything of that, then you reach 37% of global emission, which is a lot. But 8 of 10% to 10% is actually linked to food waste, which is a lot. It is increased the food waste by 40% since 60s, and 30% of the food now is wasted or lost. Losses are linked to the production side. It's what is left on ground, what is left during the post-harvest activities, losses in the processing and in the distribution. Waste is on the supply side. It's the waste related to the retailers and the consumers, and if we actually work better to lower the losses and the waste linked to the food system, there is indeed a reduction of greenhouse gas emission. But we would actually consider this as we would free 2 million of square kilometers from agriculture for the losses. The same if we zero the waste of food. So there is a great potential also on something that we could, at least in the supply side, control ourselves. And then I come up with the conclusion of this section. As I said, the land management has a high mitigation potential. This is undoubtful, not only, for the mitigation in terms of climate change, but also when applied sustainably, has also a potential to provide multiple co-benefits. And but we need a rapid reduction, as we were saying, in all anthropogenic greenhouse gas emission sectors. All sectors need to contribute, and we need to consider that fossil fuel need to be phased out to achieve the climate goals. So any delay of this action actually will bring our temperature trajectory up and up, and this will make any action within the land sector very hard to achieve, because changing the environmental conditions will also decrease the effect of this kind of actions. So when I hear that okay, we will plant millions or trillions of trees, this is extremely good, extremely important, but has to come side by side with a strong and immediate reduction of anthropogenic emissions in all sectors. So, and this is what is actually the conclusion of the report, that the land is under growing human pressure. Land is part of the solution, but can't do it all. That's extremely important to emphasize. So I come to the end of my presentation, and thank you. I don't know if with the time-wise, how I'm, I don't know if I was earlier or I don't know. So if you don't mind, oh, no. Danilo,
thanks a lot, Lucia.
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
I'm alive. Okay.
Danilo was sleeping on the table.
No, I'm sorry. I was just checking the weather condition, because here in the northwestern part of Italy we are under some problem concerning floods and landslides. So it's my job. So I was a little bit distracted. Okay, coming back to the chairing the IPROMO summer school, there is a question from Gent. I would like Prof. Lucia could tackle a little biodynamic agriculture as a sustainable method of farming developed by Dr. Rudolf Steiner, since it was developed initially in order to tackle the problem of soil erosion that was occurring around the first half of the 20th century. Could biodynamic farming the sustainable agriculture of the future?
This is, yeah, I mean, we should consider the scale and on which this kind of systems can be deployed. Indeed, biodynamic agriculture has, I'm not such expert of this kind of systems, and probably you know better than me, but indeed any system that actually promotes the soil protection as biodynamic is actually promoting, as far as I know, so increases the productivity of soil in with a zero inputs due to the synthetic fertilizers. It's indeed very good for climate, but probably if we go for very extensive systems where that requires a large area to achieve the same productivity of other systems like that rely on precision agriculture, for instance. I'm talking about climate change wise. I'm not taking into consideration all the other potential effects linked to, let's say, water or biodiversity or these other impacts. So let me be a little bit focused on the climate aspect. Then you should consider that you need a much more larger area to actually meet the needs of food needs of also consider an increasing population. So it's always difficult to find the right balance between productivity and sustainability. It's not easy at all. So those we have made ourselves in our institute a research on the emissions linked to one kilo of bread produced with conventional agriculture, 1 kilo of bread produced with organic agriculture. And indeed, the emissions associated with organic agriculture, also considering the reduced use of fertilizer, was higher somehow. But we focus only on CO2 aspects, so on emissions, not CO2 emission aspects. While if we were also considering the water balance, life cycle, or biodiversity or other impacts, probably the results would be different. So I would say yes and no, but we need to consider all the overall environmental impact of both the systems and their efficiency to produce what is needed at a large scale.
Okay, thank you. There's a comment from Nepal, from Gita. Nepal has failed to benefit from the contemporary CDM due to its complicated monitoring, reporting, and verification requirement. RIDD Plus mechanism may be even more demanding in terms of MRV, owing to numerous tedious qualifications. Unless this overall carbon crediting process is simplified, developing countries like Nepal will not be able to benefit from this global provision or contribute to the global climate change mitigation.
Yeah, I fully agree, especially in the forestry sector. The level of complexity Reforestation CDM was extremely high, and this actually hampered their applicability in many countries. In general, yeah, I share the view. On the other hand, it's always difficult to find the right balance between safeguards, ensuring that environmental integrity is achieved, that the activities are actually pursuing an increase of reduction of emissions and not overflooding the market with hot air. This is extremely important. So it's always challenging to find the right balance between strict rules that are indeed increasing the complexity of the system, so also excluding and creating limits in the accessibility of this mechanism, and the social and environmental integrity and robustness of the system. This is a real challenge. I mean, how the negotiations are going, I think we will go towards a more flexible system, which is for the same reasons I was saying before, good and bad. Because good, because it could allow the access of more countries, but bad because are those emission reduction really reliable? are robust, are really occurring, or as the baseline is set loosely, or the standards are very low, then also the quality of the emission reduction that you achieve is low, if ever achieved. So hopefully we'll come out with a good rules.
Okay, thank you very much. There is already another comment from Gent. Indeed, climate change wise is an interesting keyword.
Yes, it is. I mean, when we made this study, we were really, I mean, we are consuming, I mean, tend to consume sustainable products. So when you make this analysis by yourself and the results are completely different from what you were expecting, we were like, oh my God. I'm referring on this organic versus conventional study we did. Yeah, but this is the focus shouldn't be just on mitigation. I mean, the multiple challenges that we are facing. That's why I wanted to also to include in this in the first slide the 4 report, including also the biodiversity, because it's important to see the ecosystem as a whole. We cannot just focus on mitigation, which is extremely important, but the balance across all the sectors and the challenges is sustainable development challenges is crucial. Any other question? Sorry?
I'm not sure it was a question or an unintentional open microphone. Is there a question, please?
Yes, we have few. I think we can also open a debate if you, I mean, we are.
Yeah, we are quite not late. We are
perfectly on time.
Yeah,
yes.
And that is great. So if you don't mind, I'm stopping now the recording, and